on this computer. Okay, so we're recording now. We've been chatting a little bit, but now I'm going to go into some things. Let me just start out. I'm going to look at some things people have turned in. Just kind of talk about those things. But let me just start by throwing it open here to ask if people have any questions about the current assignment, what we're supposed to be doing, anything like that.
The only question I had, I guess, was as far as layering the images, is it okay to also use layer masks if I want to put part of an image in instead of an entire image in the demo? And I haven't finished it, so you may do this, and I haven't seen it yet. You took selections using different colors, like the different channels, rather, channel colors, but I didn't see you like actually taking a selection of an image just based on I like that part and I want to use it for this. Is that okay? Is that okay to do for this?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. There's the exercise with the melon head thing where I'm creating selections and creating layer masks to create the melon head. And then, so like that's kind of one approach where you're creating selections based on, well, you can create selections based just on shapes, the edges of things, color, stuff like that. And so the melon head is all about creating selections and creating a layer mask. And then the multi-layer thing, I'm specifically talking about how to use, the color within an image to combine images, using different blending modes. And you can absolutely combine those things. It's like, I'm demoing one thing here, I'm demoing another thing over here.
Right.
And I'm keeping them kind of separate just in terms of the demonstrations. But yeah, you want to be able to combine these things, any way that's appropriate.
Great, because I'm using the cat in one of Sarah's pictures strategically placed, and I wanted to make sure that was going to work.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the picture, like a room with some people, and one of those.
Right.
Okay.
Sweet.
It is blended. It's blended in. I used blending modes, but it was cut out first.
His name was Finnegan. May he rest in peace.
I will honor Finnegan.
Finnegan?
Yeah, that was his name, but he didn't make it. So thank you for that, Adam.
Yeah, when I looked at that picture, I was kind of wondering, are these like roommates or, just friends of yours?
Yeah, that was a series I did of my best friend for a year. I documented her in our house for over the course of a year, and that was just one of the vignettes, I guess. But we had a very colorful house, so that's why I picked that one.
Yeah, there was a colorful picture. I saw that was your color.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, I have one more question really quick. It was about image size. So the images that I took, I had raw versions of, and then the images that we're sharing, because we're not posting raw files, are much, much smaller. Is there any way in particular that if you wanted to, basically what I'm asking is how far would you stretch, a JPEG image to fit the size of of a raw image? I mean, because you know they look tiny when you bring them in next to each other.
Well, there shouldn't be a difference in size between raw and other format images. Um,
For
I mean,
mine, there it
I mean
seems to be,
raw.
I have my raw image and I import the or I bring the JPEG in, and it looks like, you know, a tiny image in the middle of the massive raw file that I took.
Okay, you're talking about the same image.
No, different images. For instance, you know, if my background is an image that I shot with my camera that was raw, and I don't have the world's best camera, but it's 3 megapixels, 4 megapixels, something like that.
Oh, it's probably more than that.
It's probably more than that now that I say that out loud. Yes.
Yeah.
That camera, it's a point and shoot, and that camera versus like importing any one of the JPEGs that people have shared so far.
Yeah. Well, I've noticed that there's a variety of resolutions of the JPEGs that people have posted, and the thing about stretching an image is that you're talking about taking an image and making it lower resolution. When you take an image, whatever size it is, when you make it bigger, the pixels per inch get smaller, basically. So it's like, in the melon head demo I did, the head, the melon, was one of the lower resolution images I had. So when I brought in different things, they were bigger, and I made them smaller, and that's okay. But taking something that's small and making it bigger, you're losing resolution.
What happens in that case? Is it just multiplying, like where there was 1 pixel before, it's turning that into 4 or 5 pixels, or is?
Yeah. Well, Photoshop has different modes, and we could actually look at that a little bit. There's a demo I do. It wasn't part of this. Oh, yeah. I wonder if I have that image. Let me go ahead and jump into Photoshop here. Okay, so I have to go into sharing. Where's my Photoshop screen? Okay, so you see my Photoshop screen, right?
Yes.
All right, let me go ahead and make a new file. Now, this is an on-screen presentation. I'm not going to make a big file. I'm just going to say new and select. I mean, I'm actually recording. What you see is like 1280 by 720, so 720p video. So I could just go ahead and make a file that size. Well, because I'm doing video, it's showing me these guides here, kind of video guides. I'm going to go into view, clear the guides, just to get that off the screen. I want to, well, I'm going to go into the course here and grab some of your images that people have been posting, just to kind of start working with what people are sharing there. Where is that? Okay, yeah, well, this is good. Yeah, Molly put up some pictures that were actually kind of low res, and that's what we're talking about is resolution. So I'm going to copy one of her images here, go into Photoshop and paste, and you see that this image isn't even 1280 by 720. It's smaller. I'm going to go back and grab, let's see. Well, Adam, your images were kind of higher resolution, but I'm going to grab your color one, and you can't see me doing this, I assume. You just see my Photoshop screen. I'm going to paste. So your image is much bigger than what Molly is putting up here, and that's kind of what we're talking about. I'm going to also copy your texture image, bring it over. I'm just going to paste. There's your texture, and it's much bigger than the screen we have here. All right, so with Molly's, I don't know, let me actually look at your image here. If I take this image, you see all this, this is 100% of its resolution. If I do Control T and start, well, let me see, what would be a good way to do this? I'm going to scale this down, and because it's much bigger, I'm going to go and edit, transform, scale, and I'm going to go up here and I'm just going to make it a lot smaller. So up here, I'm going to go down to 10% by 10%. I wonder where it is. It's off screen now. Let me undo that. I don't know what, it's a good way to do this. I might have to like zoom out here because your image, you know, the edges are way out here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and scale it down so it's within, you know, the screen. Then I'm going to zoom back in here. And so you saw the resolution that was there. I'm going to make this very, 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 very tiny and click OK. Now, because this is not in a container, making it that small, I threw away a lot of information. So if I have an image this size and resolution, and I want it to fill the screen, okay, I could Control T, and I could scale it up here. But you see what I've got. When I scaled it down, it threw away a lot of the information. And now I have this low res image, you know, that I've scaled up, and I just have, you know, huge pixels. So this is what's going to happen whenever you bring in like a lower resolution image and scale it up, is you're scaling up noise to a certain extent. Now, when I clicked OK, notice that it changed. We don't see the big pixels, it's softer because it's actually interpolating. When you scale an image, like if I go in image size, I want to change the size of this image. you know, when it scales and it's actually sampling, you know, the pixels, there are different things. Like when we saw the big pixels, that was like, well, they've actually changed this. This is interesting. Nearest neighbor. Okay. Wow. I didn't realize I'd changed these things. If you select nearest neighbor when you're scaling, it's basically just duplicating pixels. Like, you know, if I'm making something bigger, okay, this pixel, there's one of them, and I make it 3 times bigger. Now there's like 3 of them by 3 of them. So there are 9 pixels that are all the same color. But the usual thing is to interpolate, where instead of just duplicating pixels, it averages the color of the pixel you're scaling up with its neighbor, so that there's like a gradient. And there are different ways of doing that. There's linear, which basically is like a linear gradient from your pixel to the next pixel to create those extra pixels. Or there's bicubic, where it is kind of a different slope, where, you know, the color of your pixel kind of stays and then it falls off to the next one. I mean, I could graph this out, but you know, there are different ways of doing that so that you get some different results there. But so when I scale this up, here you see it just duplicating the pixels to make more of them. But when I click OK, it's doing this blending. So it's softer. Usually, in most cases, this is what you want, is kind of a smoother blending thing going on. Okay, so, you know, I took your high resolution image, threw away most of the resolution, and then scaled it back up. Now, one of the things I was talking about is like creating a container. If I take this image here, right click, and convert it to a smart object, it's going to behave very differently. Again, let me zoom out here so I can get to the edges of this thing. And I scale it down. I'm holding the shift key, so is it distorting? It should be doing that proportionately. Okay. Anyway, so I'm going to scale it way down here, click OK, and zoom in. So we've done the same kind of thing here, but now it's a smart object. Now it's going to behave very differently. Okay, let me make it even smaller, smaller. Now let me scale it back up. And all the quality is still there, unlike what we saw before. And this is an important thing. If you just take a layer and scale it down, it resamples the image and creates a lower resolution. Well, technically, it's still high resolution. It's just fewer pixels in the smaller image. Then when you scale that up, you see that low resolution. When you make a smart object, it basically puts your image in a container, and you scale the container down, but you aren't resampling the image. The pixels don't change inside. You just scale the container down, and then when you scale the container back up, all the pixels are still there. So smart objects are very important. And one of the things that is probably going to bite me here is that in the newest versions of Photoshop, they've changed the default behaviors of some things where making smart objects is like the default thing to do. So in some of my demos, I haven't gone through all of my old demos to know where they break exactly. But Adobe, they've decided like having smart objects is the smart way to go in a lot of cases. So they make that the default behavior. And so you may see some things coming up where it automatically creates a smart object where it didn't used to. And so some of my demos might not track exactly, but it's a good thing to know about the smart object thing. It's a good thing. It's basically more of an object-based approach to working with images that Photoshop has been gradually moving to over the last 40 years. But in general, going back to your original question, you usually want to start with higher resolution things, and if you scale them down to fit, that's fine. But if you start with something lower resolution and scale up, you're just scaling up noise, essentially. So, it's always better. Like with my melon head, the head itself was actually lower resolution. So most of the things I was bringing in were being scaled down, and that's fine because you're not throwing any, you're not creating noise. So I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay. What time is it? Okay, 8:30 here. I know people probably haven't gone through all the demos and things, but are there any other questions based on what you've seen or what you're supposed to be doing? Okay. Well, let me just kind of work a little bit with like the images that you guys have provided here. Just kind of talking about these techniques in the context of some of the images available. So this was color. Let's see. We also had, okay, so this was a texture image, and this was Molly, right? Her images were all kind of lower resolution, and so yeah, you would have to scale them up probably to use them, unless you use them in a smaller portion of your image. So that's one thing about resolution, is that there's the size of the image, but if the image is small, it's still high resolution. If you take the image and you scale it up, you lose resolution. So these images, if I'm just using this over here, it's still a high-res image. If I scale it up, then it's a low-res image. Well, I actually kind of like that. Okay, so let me take a look at this. So if we want to use this as texture, not a lot of people have put up shape things, which is kind of like having shapes to work with. Let me see if there's anything that's kind of shape-like here. People, oh, Kamara, you put up some things that I hadn't seen. Oh, I like your texture. Let me see. So here's one of, this is Kamar's texture. Would still like a shape. Let me grab William's lines here, because I think I can work with that. Copy, paste. Oh, that's a fairly high resolution image. Let me scale that down. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit. Oh yeah, that's bigger. Okay, so the reason I brought this one in is because they're these dark bars, and that's something I can work with. The kind of the idea here is like what aspects of the image you can use. And if I want these dark things, because they're dark, the multiply mode is something that I can use to apply those. So I'm going to click OK here for just the sizing, and I'm going to go in here and change the blending mode to multiply. Okay, so now the darker areas are being superimposed on the layers below. So it's a way of kind of using the dark parts of the image. And, you know, I'm also getting some of the other areas, but I could actually isolate the dark areas just by changing, by adjusting this. Let me apply a adjustment. Well, I like to demonstrate using curves a lot. So there's the dark area and there's the light area. Okay, so if I bring this down, I start losing the light area. It starts to turn to white. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to isolate what I want really well, it looks like. Now notice that, you know, adjustment layers affect everything underneath. So I have this curves above here, but I actually want to have the curves only affect William's image here. So I'm in here, there's this icon here where it basically clips this curves to that layer just below. Okay, so let's kind of back out of this, take a look. So the curves only affect the layer with the bars and not what's below it. So if, you know, if I go in here, you'll see that it's not affecting the underlying image, it's just affecting the image on top. Okay, so this is the kind of thing I want people to kind of experiment with, is like, what I'm mostly interested in here is like the black bars. And so I'm trying to isolate them by whiting out a lot of the other part of the image so that we just have the black bars and they're superimposed. So that's kind of an approach here. What else do we have here? We've got let's see. So we have your color here. Now, if I just want the color, I can select that. And for the blending mode, I could, for instance, select color, where we're seeing just the hue and saturation from that layer being applied to everything below. Here we have a texture. Oh, I don't have the texture selected there. There we go. So let's zoom in here. Yeah, I'm not sure how I want to apply this. You could look at different blending modes here. Like if I multiply, the darker part of the texture is being superimposed. If I do screen, it's kind of like adding color. If I do overlay, overlay is kind of like combination of multiply and screening, where you're kind of multiplying the dark areas and screening the light areas, so that it's kind of a combination of the two to overlay one image on another here. So there are a lot of things to play with in terms of the blending modes. And you know, I think I did record, it looked like a demo talking about blending modes. I'm not sure how complete it is. I didn't have time to watch the whole thing. It was like a half-hour long, and I only had 10 minutes before class. So I'm not sure how exhaustive it was, but you know, check that out. Yeah, it'd be nice to have some shapes here, because with shapes, kind of like what we were talking about before, with shapes, sometimes, you know, if it's like a dark shape on a white background, you can just use that to, you know, have like a texture within the shape or a different texture outside the shape. But that's also a case where we're talking about, you could actually create a selection for things like that and apply that. So, you know, for instance, if this texture here, I didn't want everywhere, I could, you know, let's say that I wanted that texture here and here and here and here. I could, you know, just holding the shift key to create those 4 ellipses and create a layer mask. Okay, so now that texture is only happening in those areas. So you can definitely you know, combine all those things. You know, just thinking about this, I'm not sure, you know, going through the demos, if there are a lot of ways of creating selections, of course, but I'm not sure if I ever talked about a lot of the things in the select menu in terms of the way you can modify a selection. For instance, you know, let me turn off a couple things here. Okay, so we have a texture on top of a texture here. I'm just going to drag out an ellipse. And If I go into quick mask mode over here, I can see, my selection like that. And, it's a hard-edged ellipse. If I go up here to select, there are some things, for instance, modify. I could create a border. Let's make this like a 20 pixels. Okay. Then if I look at that selection, you see that I've just selected this ring rather than the ellipse. Okay, I'm undoing. I could go into modify and I could smooth. It's already pretty smooth. I could expand, I could contract. So expanding would kind of bump it out by a number of pixels. So I could make it like 10 pixels, wider or whatever. But what I want to do here is particularly is like feathering. So we have this hard-edged elliptical selection. I could go in here Oh, okay. It's on my other screen. All right. So I could say I want a feather radius of 50 pixels. Now what that means is it's going to create a soft selection instead of like the hard edge selection. It's going to, from where I drew the selection, it'll fade the selection out over 50 pixels to the outside and 50 pixels to the inside. So I'm just going to click OK. And then when I go into the quick mask here, you can see the result is a selection that is very soft. It's blending from what's selected 100% in the center, not selected at all to the outside, and then there's kind of a gradient there. If I save this selection to the channels and look at it, this is what it looks like. It's just a soft ellipse here. So what that means is that if I turn this into a mask, oh, I have the wrong layer selected. Okay, select the right layer, turn it into a mask. You can see this texture, blends pretty seamlessly into the background. We have the texture in the center, and it's just blending into the area. I'd often do this, like, with the photo self-portrait thing. It's like if I wanted to take my eye and make a copy of it to the middle of my forehead to have a third eye, I do an ellipse around my eye, do a soft selection, copy it and move it, and then this soft selection would blend the edges, so it's not like a hard cutout thing, but it kind of blends seamlessly. And it's really worth, we have these menus up here. When you're looking at selection tools, go to the select menu, go and look at some of the different options up here, including modify, and see what kind of things that does for you. And of course, it's on its own layer here, so I can still take this and move it around. Okay, so I just wanted to kind of talk about a couple things that weren't in the demo videos, reinforce some things that were in the demo videos. Not sure if there's anything else in particular I wanted to cover here. Any questions about stuff I've been doing?
No, but I think that feathering tool is going to be really useful. I haven't seen that at all.
Yeah, and that's kind of I mean, one thing, of course, is that you can always like manually soften edges. You know, that's a very uniform way of doing things.
Yeah, it
But,
looks nice and even.
Yes. Although, you know, if you didn't want nice and even, what do we got here? Okay. Now let me. Oh, yeah, that's right. It's got all kinds of different layers going there. If let me bring in another image that doesn't have anything. Yeah, my computer's freaking out a little bit. Okay. I'm going to select one of William's images here, paste it in. Let's put it on top so we can actually see it. Oh, it's fairly big. So again, zoom out here. Yeah. Yeah, William's a photographer, I think, so he likes resolution. I have to get my computer back under control here. I might have to wait a second here. I'm kind of waiting for Photoshop to settle down. Yeah, we're almost at the end of the hour here. I do want to finish demonstrating this once. I know I have a lot of things going on my computer. I don't think it's happy with me. Any questions that I can answer while I'm waiting for my computer to get under control? Oh, are you guys frozen too?
So, can you hear us?
Not for a while there. Is like things were frozen. Are you live?
I think so.
Okay. So I think my computer might have recovered. Yeah, it was totally freaking out. It's still, Photoshop is still being unresponsive here. So while I'm waiting for Photoshop to respond to what I'm doing, anyone have any questions I can answer?
Don't think so. Not for me. Not right now.
Okay. All right. I don't know what happened. It's just disappeared. The yeah, sometimes when you're doing like screen recording and live stuff while you're doing stuff in Photoshop, things can get a little bulky. Okay, I'm going to try this one more time. Okay. Let's try zooming out here. Okay. So this is one of William's images. And I guess we're talking about like soft selections, like feathering, like the ellipse. You can of course create soft selections with anything. Let me take this and use the quick selection tool. Try to select this cross. And I'm not going to try to be real careful here, but I'm going to create a mask for that. And I see that I'm missing some things, but I can always go in and, for instance, like paint on the selection. So I have the selection selected here. I'm going to I'm using the right square bracket to make the brush larger. I'm going to select white, so I'm adding to the selection. But I have kind of a, well, actually it's a fairly hard brush. Yeah, it's very hard. If I make that softer, and bigger, I can create all kinds of soft selections here. So if I want to kind of feather this out here with this soft big brush, I can blend these together. And using feathering is a very even approach, but sometimes you want to have more control. Now I have a huge brush where I'm just kind of doing a real soft blending of this image into the other image. If I switch to black, make the brush smaller, I could go in and shape that any way I want. Okay, so just following up on the feathering thing. There's the kind of the selection approach to things, and there's the brush approach to things. We're going to keep seeing more and more how those are like two basic ways of controlling an image: creating selections and doing something, or using a brush. Okay. So there was the melon head exercise, mostly doing selections and layer masks, and then the multi-layer thing was mostly working with like the colors and shading within images and using different blending modes to get different effects. But I do want you to combine those techniques together to create an image. And it'll probably be fairly abstract. I mean, what I have on my screen right here, I don't know what that is. It's like we see several layers mixing together. It's kind of funny that there's the cross, and then we seem to have like radiating lines coming from one of the other layers. So I don't know, maybe that works. So yeah, in terms of the criteria for this, it's kind of more abstract than what we were dealing with the self-portrait. So the image can kind of be anything, but I'm really looking for how you use what's in the different images, working together. And again, it's going to be fairly abstract, but I'm kind of looking for how you make use of the information in the layers to construct your image. And of course, we're looking for composition, balance. You could, at the end, you could always throw some adjustment layers on to adjust the brightness and contrast and color balance of the overall image. Once you've combined all these things, then you can tweak the whole thing, using the adjustment layers to get, the quality that you want in terms of, brightness and contrast and all those things. So you can adjust those things on a layer by layer basis, but when you have the finished image, you can always still tweak the final result for the best quality possible. All right, any final questions? Okay. Well, I look forward to seeing what you come up with. There should be more contributions in terms of source images, but I see that there are a few things in there. It'd be nice to see more source images with shapes. A lot of people did line and color and texture, but it's kind of nice to have some shapes in there. And I didn't have anything really with shapes to demo with, but if you have shapes, then you can have like an object that has a particular texture and color to it, and you can have another object with a different texture and color thing happening with it. Right now, everything is kind of less defined by a region of a shape. So, I mean, the cross here it is like one of the few shapes that I've seen people, put up. So, it's always going to be dependent on the images you have to work with. So I'm looking forward to seeing what you come up with. All right, well, if there's nothing else, I'll be seeing you online.
All right, thanks.
Okay, bye. See you guys.
Bye-bye.